It's time to engage, educate, and empower with TraceyMaxfield.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Engage, Educate, and Empower, the podcast which aims to highlight the social issues, life challenges, and day-to-day problems that our children, teenagers, and young adults are dealing with all around the world. So today, my very special guest is someone that I connected with a couple of years via social media, mainly because the both of us actually are on a similar life journey and we're first-time authors. We've both read each other's books and actually put a review on Amazon. And whilst we've both kind of gone on a slightly different paths with regard to what our purpose is, what our life journey is, ultimately, the both of us are connected very strongly with regards to children and teenagers and mental health, mental wellness, mental illness, and suicide. So today's very special guest is Lisa Zarcone. Lisa is an author, a child and mental health advocate, a public speaker, a blogger, an inspirationalist, a radio personality, and the Massachusetts National Ambassador and Regional Director for the New England area for NAASCA, National Association of Adult Survivors of Childhood Abuse. And for many of you who've been following this podcast, you will have remembered that back in April, we actually interviewed Bill Murray, who founded NAASCA, Somerville. So Lisa is a wife, a mother of three, and grandmother of three. And she took all her past experiences of personal trauma and abuse and wrote a detailed memoir of her life. The Unspoken Truth, a memoir, a child's story, an adult's journey towards healing. Lisa gained her voice by validating her story, and she healed through the process. She was able to see the view and perspective of the people in her life, and that is where she found forgiveness. She is an everyday woman with an extraordinary gift for giving and is full of compassion. She has worked with disabled children and adults teaching life skills and writing. She also served as a mentor to young women in a locked down facility teaching journaling, poetry, and art therapy. Lisa's story is very raw. It is heart-wrenching in places. And at some point you may just shake your head and go, that's just disgusting. And so I do want to forewarn you. However, I think it's really important for us to understand what she went through as a child and a teenager and what has helped her become the person she is today. Lisa is currently working on book 2, the Book of Joanne, which will focus more on her relationship with her mother and how the illness affected their relationship throughout the years. She will also focus on how they made it work as a mother and daughter, overcoming many obstacles. She is also looking to promote her children's series of books with her granddaughter Phoebe and her stuffed bear Valentine as they go on many adventures together. Now, Lisa has appeared on many podcasts, radio shows, TVs, newspapers, blog interviews, including, as we know, Blog Talk Radio, National Association of Adult Survivors of Childhood. She has appeared on WSBS Radio, Network, Community Access TV, and One Top Mother podcast. I've also been on that, and also the podcast with Dr. Joanne White. So please stay tuned. You will love Lisa's story. She is very heartwarming and inspirational. And I think not only will it help parents and actually adults everywhere, but also for any teenagers or young adults who may be listening, I think it'll help you move forward, from darkness into light. So please stay tuned. As usual, we're going to do some quick commercial breaks, and then we'll be right back.
TraceyMaxfield is a retired nurse with over 36 years' experience in mental health and dementia. She has spent years studying, researching, and writing on dementia care, mental illness, and bullying in teenagers. Tracey struggled with chronic depression starting in her 20s, and after years of intense workplace stress, bullying, and harassment, her chronic depression intensified. Tracey wrote her book, Escaping the Rabbit Hole: My Journey Through Depression, as a way not to only relieve her stress and anxiety, but to help her friends and family better understand depression. The book became an international guide for mental health awareness, allowing Tracey to focus her attention on helping children, teenagers, and their parents work through mental health issues and bullying. She travels all over the world to meet with schools, mental health advocates, and experts in the mental health fields. She also offers online courses to help children, teenagers, and their parents work through issues, bringing families closer and to bring awareness to bullying in society. For more information on Tracey, her mission, the show, Tracey's book, and offered courses, visit TraceyMaxfield.com. You can see the latest news on mental health, upcoming guests on the podcast, read Tracey's blogs and articles, and more. Plus, follow Tracey all over social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube to watch the podcasts. See her daily messages and motivation and learn about each podcast guest and experts. Plus, while you're on the website at TraceyMaxfield.com, be sure to sign up for the free monthly newsletter. Follow Tracey with her upcoming events, interviews, seasonal tips, and the latest articles discussing important mental health topics and issues. And when you subscribe, you'll get a free copy of Tracey's booklet, Why Our Kids Are Suffering and How We Can Help Them. Just go to TraceyMaxfield.com. Tracey is committed to bringing parents and their children closer, to battle bullying and bring awareness to the mental health of children. That's why Tracey is offering her online courses to any adults, parents, children, and teenagers struggling during those hard times. Sign up for the course at TraceyMaxfield.com. You'll receive 8 full modules, over 12 videos, resources, and support discussing mental health, mood disorders, eating disorders, behavioral disorders, social media, drugs, suicide, risks and signs, and much, much more. Plus, you'll get access to Tracey's private Facebook group for individuals going through the same thing you are. Connect with others and share ideas, support, and motivation with Tracey helping along the way. Tracey's online courses is now for a limited time available for only $158. See all information online at TraceyMaxfield.com, where a brighter future is possible.
And welcome back, everyone. And as promised, I'd like to introduce you to a social media friend that we're now actually getting to see each other face to face instead of just via posts and texting. Lisa Zarcone, welcome so very much. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you on the show.
Oh, Tracey, I'm so glad to be here. I'm glad we're connecting this way. This is just awesome.
So in the introduction, I mentioned that the both of us connected because we were first-time authors, although I know you're now going on to write more books. I haven't got there yet.
You will.
But I also give that warning that as you begin to share your story, many people may find it quite difficult to hear because yours is different than mine, but both stories were very real and raw. And I believe that in order not only for us to heal, but for people to truly understand the message and also to help them, the more honest and real we are, the better able they can identify with us, but also trust us because they know what they're going through too.
Yes, exactly.
So please share your story.
My story.
Yes.
I know when we say it that way, it's like, it's just huge. You know, we all have a story and we all have, our journey that we've been on. And you and I have connected, obviously through social media and our books and our personal stories. And the mental health aspect connects us together. And there's abuse factors as well.
Yes.
So my story, the unspoken truth. And this is my story of my childhood, growing up with my mom, who was severely mentally ill. and, the path that we travel together. And you're right, we do both write from a very raw place. And I always tell people that as well. If you're going to read my story, just be prepared, because I say it how it was, how it is, and how it happened. And I don't hold back. So my story is a bit different because I write through the eyes of a child,
Yes.
my eyes. So I'm sharing with people, and as I say that, I've always wanted people to see it through through the lens of a child, because it's important to understand what the child has been through. So my story, yes, is written through my eyes, how I saw it, how I felt it in the moment. So it is compelling, it's raw, it's real. At times, it's really explicit, because as I got older, we talk about the sexual abuse. So that part I am also raw with, because again, I want people to understand the reality of what happens to us and how we process. So in reading my story, when you start from the beginning, I'm a 6-year-old child. I have already been through things because my mom has been suffering from mental illness, but then it's taken another turn. My brother passes away from leukemia. My brother's 9. And he was my best friend. He was my go-to guy. He was my everything. He was my protector. He actually shielded me from a lot of the things that my mom was doing, because my mom was very bizarre in her behaviors. So he shielded me from much of that. So when I lost him, it was very, very devastating, because we lived in this era of silence, which is another huge topic to talk about. I grew up in the 70s. Nothing was ever shared or talked about. So when my brother passed away, he was there one day, gone the next, and nobody ever talked to me about it or shared or asked the questions. Are you okay? How are you feeling with all this? Nobody ever asked. So I was kind of really just fumbling along in life. And I was 6. My mom, my dad's always said that my mom died the day my brother died. She was never able to recoup from losing her son, on top of being, struggling with her mental illness. So my father was distraught as well, and he was destroyed in so many ways, because for one small period of time in our life, we had the perfect little family. It was mom, dad, brother, sister, beautiful home. Dad worked, mom worked, and then she stayed home once we were born. So it was like that classic, white picket fence lifestyle. And unfortunately, as my mom's illness unraveled and then we lost my brother, everything fell apart.
Yeah.
So we all went in different directions, so to speak. So my dad is on his journey, my mom is on hers, and I'm just a child lost in the middle of this madness and dysfunction. My household was extremely dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
So as time went on, my home got dark. It got very, very dark, very lonely, and very scary. My mom's behaviors escalated. She would take herself off medications, and she would be in very, very deep depressions, and then very, very high manias. So she cycled continually. So my mom was diagnosed with bipolar, and she also had a personality disorder. So she would present as schizophrenic, but she truly wasn't schizophrenic. It was schizoaffective. So my mom had many things going on at one time. Again, not addressed properly, because the sign of the times. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want to deal with it. Even family and friends, nobody understood it, because there was no education. So it was the taboo subject at that time. And even as we come forward into today's time frame, it is kind of a taboo subject still. We have to really push to get it out there for people to really look at it. So, here's my mom struggling. My dad's off doing his thing. I'm this child up in the middle of all of it, being abused daily. I'm being mentally abused, emotionally abused, and physically abused by my mother. So our home was just so unstable and just so dysfunctional, and my parents would fight, and that would be dysfunctional. And then as we moved forward, and I'm living this daily lifestyle. So now here I am trying to go to school, try to learn, always known as the child who was the daydreamer, who never can grasp things. Why is she such a daydreamer? Why doesn't she get anything? Not looking at the bigger picture that I was being traumatized. I was traumatized. And nobody, like I said, asked those questions. Not doctors, teachers, neighbors who all saw things, family. They left it. They left it there because nobody knew what to do with it. So it's unfortunate. And I dragged along trying to figure it out along the way. And I was a very lost girl for a very long time. And then it hit a point where my parents did split up. My dad finally left. He couldn't take it anymore. He was just his own mess, I guess, to
Yes.
say, and him leaving me behind was definitely the wrong thing to do. I do not support it. Him and I have had that conversation. But in his defense, he was definitely a lost man at that time. And I think he was hurting in his own ways that he just couldn't see past that.
Yes.
The anger, the hurt, losing his son, losing his wife in so many, retrospect, and, not even thinking about, I do have this child here. This child needs me. And he couldn't see past that. And of course, my mom was just living in oblivion, so she just couldn't see anything but her own psychotic world. Because she talked in many different ways. There was different parts of my mom. My mom cycled so much that she had different personalities that would go with each feeling. So as a kid, I'm trying to figure her out. I'm studying her. I'm trying to understand her. I'm trying to be out of her way as much as possible. So, because I would get hit. I would get hit with objects, not just her hand. And, I've talked about like a couple of profound moments that I could share. She would come into my room at night and she would stand at the side of my bed. Her eyes would be like glassed over and she'd have a scissors in her hand and she would hold it up above me and she'd just stand there. So I'm like 8, 9 years old and I'm going, Mom, like, what are you doing? What's going on? She wouldn't respond to me. She would just stand there cold and with these scissors and just kind of doing this and never saying anything. I'm terrified. I'm thinking to myself, am I going to die? I was like, what's happening? Like, why is she doing this to me? She's my mother. And then just like that, she'd turn around and walk out. And as a kid, it just really messes with your brain. It really messes, in so many levels, because now I'm thinking, is she coming back? Is this the night that I die? What's going to happen to me? What's wrong with my mother? Because I was always wondering, why is my mom acting this way? What's wrong with her? And can I fix her? Can I help her? I would think all these things, and you're just a kid. And it's just such a hard life to live and to try to be productive in other ways. I would walk out the door and pretend like nothing ever happened, and I would live my life in school and try to function there and then come back home. And when I would hit those steps, it was this sinking feeling that would hit. And I would be terrified because I didn't know what I was going to walk into. What was my day going to be when I walked back into that house? And I called it the House of Horrors because that's how I felt. It was like I didn't know what was going to come next. And it was a scary time for me. And after my dad left, it got even worse. Like my mom went to a whole nother level of her psychosis. This is when the sexual abuse came in. I was about 13 at the time. And there was a boy from our neighborhood who was gone. He left our neighborhood and he was very troubled. And then he came back and he came to our door and he started talking to my mother. And he had a lot of issues like my mom. He was definitely mentally ill. He was abused. I know that. He had all these things. So he connected right away with my mom and the scenario that's happening in our household. And he walked in and he eyed the scene. And what did he decided he wanted me. He was claiming me as his prize, as I was to be his girlfriend. And I'm like, no. I mean, I was very adamant at that time. I mean, I was like, no, that's not happening. So my mom's encouraging it. She wants me to have a boyfriend. I'm like, I'm 13. I don't want a boyfriend. I'm already damaged on so many levels. The last thing I need, I was very immature in some respects because of the abuse. So I was nowhere near ready for any of that in a normal circumstance, never mind in this dysfunctional environment. So he comes in, he claims me as his own, and I'm fighting this tooth and nail. But every day he was there beating me down physically. He was beating me down emotionally. Mentally, he was, the grooming process as they talk about it. Yeah. It is the real deal, people. It's so like when I look back now and see how the process went, he was so classic in what he did to break me down. And then when he had that moment, he took the final straw. He raped me. And he was a very torturistic, sick young man. So it wasn't just about the sex. It was more about the torture. Yeah. The domination, the control, and satanic. He would come out with these satanic rituals and these satanic things that he would say. And it was terrifying on every level possible. So I was already this damaged young girl and now I'm dealing with this.
Yes.
And it was awful. It put me into a very dark space. And I want to put this out here because I know a lot of younger people may be listening to this. And I was in such a dark, heavy space. I wanted to die.
Yeah.
I wanted to commit suicide. I didn't want to be here anymore because I just couldn't take it. I couldn't live this lifestyle. This daily abuse was just so heavy. And every day I would fight for something positive. I would look, to try to find something that would make it right, to make it better, just something to say, hold on a little bit longer, And I did hit that point where I decided, I'm done. I'm just done. I can't do this anymore. It's time. I'm going to end my life. And, I thought about my brother because he was my protector. He was my, guiding light. And even after his passing, I always felt him with me. I felt like he was my guardian angel.
Yes.
And in my mind, I'm thinking, if I die, he's going to be there waiting for me. He's going to be the one to take me home and protect me and keep me safe. And that's all I wanted, was to feel safe. I wanted to feel loved, and I wanted to feel safe, just like all children. That's what they want, safety and love. And I craved it so desperately. And all I can think about was, like, if I was with him, I know nobody could hurt me ever again. So that was really in my mind. I was like, I'm going to do this. So I had a plan. And I decided that, I woke up one day and I said, today's the day. And my plan was to go up to the waterfall that was near my home. And there was rocks down below. And I said, I'm going to climb the waterfall and I am going to jump and I'm going to end it all. I'm 13 and a half years old. How devastating is that to think about? A child so young just wants to die, feeling there's no way out. There's no one they could reach out to. And that was how I felt. I felt just so alone in what my abuse and what was happening. I knew people around me were seeing things and nobody stepped in. I felt worthless.
Yeah.
I did. I felt so worthless. I'm like, why am I not worth saving? So
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, why should I even be here anymore? And I did. I had this plan, and I went up to that falls that day. I walked up to the top and I stood there looking down, thinking about, it's going to happen. I'm doing it. And I went to go put my foot off that ledge, and here I am teetering. And all of a sudden I heard something very powerful, and it was a voice, and it said to me, stop. Don't do it. Wait, this is not the answer. I heard all those words so loud and clear that it startled me, that I jumped back, and I was like, oh my God, and I felt such a rush of emotion. And, I think, was it my brother? Was it, was it his spirit speaking with me? Was it my inner strength talking to me, saying, you're stronger than this. You can make it. You can do it. So I felt like it was all those things wrapped in one.
Yes.
And I stood back and I took a breath, and I just remember everything was like big and dizzy and spinning, and it got very like psychedelic in a sense, like slow motion. And all of a sudden, here comes my mother at the bottom of the falls. So now my mom has been oblivious to all these things that are happening, and my mom is like oblivious to life in general. But here she is on this day. She had some type of clarity, thinking I was going to do something. How? I don't know. I honestly, to this day, I can never tell you truly what her mindset was. But she was at the bottom of that fall screaming at me, Lisa, get down. Do not jump. Get down. She was just yelling at me. So what did I do? I'm baffled. So I get down and I go down. And of course I confront her, and she's like out of her mind. She's like beating me up right there at the road, on the side of the road. She's smashing me and hitting me and screaming at me, calling me every name you could possibly imagine, drags me all the way home. So now we get to the house, and those classic stairs that I talk about, because to this day, those stairs, when I think about them, I could visualize myself standing there, not wanting to go in that house. And when we hit the stairs that day, my mom went from raving lunatic to a mechanical robot. She stopped talking. Her eyes glazed over again, dark and clouded, and she went silent. We walked up those stairs one by one, slowly into the house. She went to her way, and I went into my bedroom. And I sat on my bed, and I didn't even know what to think.
Yeah.
I was like, what just happened? Like, and I'm still here, you know, like I left that house with every intention of not
Yeah.
being here anymore. And I'm still here. And my mom shows up, and then my mom is like screaming, and now she's silent again. And I just pondered that. And my mom never spoke of it ever, ever again. So the many things that went on in my life were never spoken about. They were always like, you know, the reason I wrote my story the way I did and the name I gave it, The Unspoken Truth, because that was my life.
Yeah.
Everything was unspoken all the time. And very, very damaging, very, very difficult, a very hard way to live. And mind you, I'm not even 14 years old yet, you know. It's a lot in a young life of a child who's abused. And you know, I realize now as an adult, I was so not alone. There were so many other children all around me growing up together that were going through the same
Same. Yeah.
thing. We all walked around like soldiers, silent soldiers, not speaking of it. And everyone thinks everyone else's life is okay. And for many of us, it wasn't.
No. And it's actually funny that you say that because I had initially it was the physical, then it became just mental and emotional. I did not have sexual, but you know, right? Mental, emotional, what words, just the damage they do.
They do.
And it was the same thing. It was that going into the house of what is it going to be like today? What is the mood like? You know, walking on eggshells constantly. And I was a very assertive, outspoken person because I knew what was going on was wrong. And so I was the defender.
Right.
But then, of course, he comes back threefold.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny because when my book was published, and a childhood friend back in the United Kingdom contacted me on Facebook and said, "Is this you?" And I went, "Yes." And he said, "I knew it," because I only touch a little bit about my abuse in the book. It's more about depression that I experienced a few years ago. And he said to me, "I knew it. We all knew it." And he was actually apologizing. So we had been friends from 2 years of age. And I actually put on Facebook just after we reconnected a picture of us. There were 3 boys and a girl. That was me. I was a tomboy in the community. And we're sitting on a fence with our little Wellington boots and our little tricycles and our little coats. And he said, everyone in the neighborhood knew what was going on. And nobody did a thing. And he said, even as kids, they knew something was happening. And they were powerless because their parents, their role models weren't doing anything. And he profusely apologized for not doing something to help me, to save me. And I said, you owe me an apology. You know, you were a friend, and that's all that you could be at that moment, was to still be a friend. But it's so funny, and you know, it's the same is true now, where we've become a little bit more outspoken about child abuse. But you know, Lisa, it is going on. I think maybe worse than it ever was before, because we have children that were abused who, if they've not sought help, have now become the abusers.
Yes, and that is the cycle. And it's interesting because in the book I'm writing now, I'm writing my mom's story and the book of Joanne, and it's about her life and her mental illness and how, you know, she struggled. But I also talk about the generational abuse, because she was abused, and the abuse goes back even farther than her. So yes, abuse is definitely generational, and we're still seeing it today. And you know, we need to break those cycles. We need to break, you know, the stigmas, and we need to push to stop it. That cycle has to stop somewhere. And if we don't stop it, it's going to continue on to the next generation.
I agree. And also, I mean, it's 2 points. One, as adults, we have a responsibility to protect children everywhere. They do not need to be your own children.
Yes.
You should be protecting children everywhere. And we need to be more outspoken and more vigilant about it, because, I mean, right now, we're all in the midst of a crisis with this pandemic.
We are.
And with people going into mandatory quarantine, then in many states in the USA, there's lockdown. Here in Canada, we're on voluntary self-isolation and then social isolation. If, when you go out, it's that 6-foot perimeter.
Right, we have that,
But
yes.
what's heartbreaking is, while so many are complaining, oh, I'm stuck inside and I'm so bored. And it's like you're forgetting that we have domestic abuse survivors who are now still living with their abuser and cannot escape that. But child abuse has escalated dramatically.
It has. I've been watching the numbers and the stories, and I'm always pushing for that as well, because it's true. Because the more these children are not in school, so school is like their safe haven.
Exactly.
They're fed, they're cared for, they're in a safe environment, and then they go home to unstable environments, and now they're stuck home. You're right. There's no way out. So the domestic abuse has risen. Child abuse has risen. I've heard of children that have been, deaths because of a parent or a guardian. And this is all in the last month.
Exactly.
It's skyrocketed. And that comes back to, like you said, the silence, when people don't speak up. So back when I was a kid growing up and into my teenage years, nobody said anything. They saw. Families saw, we all saw, everyone saw, but no one spoke. So I've asked the questions as an adult. I've asked people, why didn't you step in? Why didn't you save me or help me? And family members, and even people that were friends in our family, said it's protocol.
Yeah.
The protocol that my dad should have stepped up and taken me out, and that was his job to do it. And I said, okay, I get old school protocol, but what's the protocol when the person who you're expecting to step in doesn't? Who saves the child? Who helps the child? Because there has to be a game plan. There has to be a plan B, because if plan A is not working and that child's still being abused, somebody needs to be strong enough and bold enough to say, stop it. And that's where we're at now, too, in this stage of the game. We need to get more people to step up and say, no, this needs to stop. So when I advocate, I'm always saying, see something, say something. Child abuse is never acceptable. It does not matter what the situation is. So like with my mom being sick, my mom had mental illness. Nobody wanted to take me away because they didn't want to make it further, worse for her or more traumatic for her. Okay, I get it to a sense, but when you look at an innocent child,
what about you?
What about the child? So we damage the child more so we don't upset the caregiver. That's not the right answer. I get the vibe of what that could mean for people, but the right answer is save the child. The child is innocent. The child does not deserve to live in that type of a lifestyle or be abused ever. So I'm really definitely strong in that feeling of that, regardless of the protocol, the child should come first.
Well, and I mean, more and more research is coming out now about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences.
Yes.
Now, my ACE score was 5. I imagine yours has to be 5 or 6, just from, the areas that you have to tick. And we know that the more ACEs a child has, the more increased the likelihood of them developing not only chronic health conditions, but mental illness and substance abuse. Mm-hmm. And this is proven. This is research. And that's why, I'm doing the work I do as well, is we need to deal with the problems upstream, not wait for them to be catastrophic downstream. Right. But to adults who are sitting listening to this or watching the video and are saying, well, it's not really my business, or I don't want to get involved. And it's like, this is a child. This is a teenager. Their brains are not fully developed.
Exactly.
Every single thing that you are standing by and seeing them being subjected to and enduring is shaping their brain to be the adult person. And right now, if they don't get any help, they are not going to do well at all. You went down a slippery slope as you became a young adult, and then your life turned around. And so more so now with this pandemic. Okay, so yes, we're all behind closed doors, but if you see something, if you hear something,
Mm-hmm.
if you notice unusual activity, if you've always seen the kids outside in the garden and now all of a sudden they've disappeared and you don't know where they are, you have a responsibility. Either connect with that family, pop over there, knock on the door, just say, hey, just checking in, how you doing, going to the grocery
Right.
store. You can fabricate something and
Exactly.
just get a sense. If you really are like, I'm not going there, then there are 1-800 child abuse hotlines.
There
You
are wellness checks. Wellness checks. You can even call your local police for a wellness check if you
exactly.
are really concerned about the child. You know, I always say, ask the questions. What's it going to hurt to ask a question? You know, ask the questions and see what's happening, because in the end, you could be saving a life.
And
You know,
that's 100% agree. And everything is confidential. They're not going to be knocking on your door going, is that the house?
exactly.
you
They're
know
just going to go do
and
what they have to do. And it's the right thing to do, to make those calls, to ask the questions, to push these things, and to tap back into what you were saying before about like developmental, disabilities. And, when you're growing up in abuse and trauma, there are those blind spots, those dark spots that, don't develop properly because of the abuse. And I even noticed myself, the more I've done research and the more I've
yeah.
advocated and learned more things, I see these things in myself, in my own processing. How I learn and how I take in information is different. It's
Oh,
different. And I know why
it
it's
has to
different.
be.
Yes, and it's all because of the way I had to learn. It was all because of the trauma that I had to go through and try to learn at the same time. It really does do damage, and that's a huge message to send out to people, is that you have to realize that children who go through chronic trauma do develop differently. Their brain develops differently, and it
Yes.
does leave lasting long-term damage. Could it be mental illness? Could it be PTSD? I have PTSD. Of course I do. I mean, going through my story, if I didn't say I had PTSD, people would look at me like, really, how could you not? You know what I'm saying? So I had to learn about that myself. But there's so many avenues. There's drug addiction and alcoholism. As a young kid, I did go down that slippery slope for a while, trying to self-medicate, to try not to feel and try not to share and try not to let anything out, because I held it so tight, and I always pushed through faith-wise. I was always like, something good is going to come. I have to keep pushing. And I did push through it. But I can say this, is that as living in silence for as many years as I did, and I couldn't get the words out, as an adult, it came back to haunt me.
Yes.
The damage, because that damage festers and festers, and your body hits a point, your brain hits a point where it has to come out. I mean, it has to come out. So unfortunately, mine came out being married 3 kids later, and all of a sudden now I'm unloading all of this stuff because I'm having the nightmares, I'm having the flashbacks. It's all coming to a head. I had to do something with it. So of course I had to share with my husband, who at 10 years of marriage is hearing some things that I went through for the first time ever. And he's like devastated, like to hear what I went through. And also saying, who did I marry? Who are you? It's like, I only know one piece of you. What is all this other stuff? So I'm processing it. I'm verbalizing it for the first time in my life. I'm sharing it with him, and I am trying to figure it out, and he's trying to figure it out. So of course I did go to counseling. I had to. There was no way I couldn't go to counseling to try to weed through this mess, because it was a mess. But that silence is deadly, and not in the sense of dying, in the sense of it really eats away at you and kills off parts of you if you don't address it and work through it. And it's the hardest work anyone will ever have to do in their life, because it was painstaking and it was devastating. And to really tap into those old feelings and those old memories, very, very difficult. And then again, to share with my husband and work through it with him as well. It was a very turbulent time. So yeah, my silence that I held in so deeply to get me through the madness definitely came back to bite me. And for anyone who holds it in, eventually it does come out, and it's very, very difficult when it does. So definitely I always say seek support,
Yes.
positive support. and once you get those words out, keep going, because that's the way you're going to find your healing and your peace inside of you, is to get it out and keep pushing for it. And it's not an overnight thing. It doesn't just say, happen and be like, oh, I said it, it's all over, I'm good now.
Yeah,
No, it takes years upon
it
years.
does.
You're always left with certain things that just don't go away. And those are the things you have to embrace as part of who you are and say, it's okay. I'm a good person. I'm doing the best that I can. These are my quirks, but I'm okay with that. I understand why it is the way it is. And you go with it, not against it. So, the process is a long process and a powerful process and a hurtful process, but worth it.
Yes.
Because, even with your damaged parts, you're whole. You're finally whole.
Absolutely. And we are fortunate in that we were both able to get support and move forward and make sense of everything that's happened. Not all adults are that fortunate. That's why you have the National Association of Adult Survivors of Childhood Abuse.
Yes.
And I'm glad that the healing is starting for many of them in a very safe, supported place.
Exactly.
For kids, you've said, when you go through abuse like that, your brain does not develop. In fact, it shrinks. And also, when you're in that fight, flight, fight mode, the inflammatory chemicals in the brain, because of the brain and body pathway connection, goes also down to the body. So that's why you have physical ailments that come along as well. But when you have your fight, flight on guard all the time, because as you're waiting for the scissors above your head again, or the guy to come in and that he's going to sexually abuse you. When you're living like that, it changes everything in the brain, your ability to function normally, for messages to be received. And I'm listening to your story and I know the outcome and I know that things work out. But for kids and teenagers, that this is now their present story. I want all of you who are listening, watching this, to think, just you saying, stop, wait a minute. You could help save that child's life.
Yes.
Literally, you could save their life that day, that week, but you could also save their future then. Because getting help and supports sooner rather than later, it enables that child, that teenager, to start healing and start moving forward. And you could be helping them not join a gang, become a bully, attempting suicide, substance abuse, criminal activity, dropping out of school. It goes on and on.
It does. It's that worthless feeling, because I felt that myself. I felt like a piece of garbage on someone's shoe being dragged around. And I write that in my book, because that was how I felt at that time. I felt like literal garbage. So why should I try? Why should I push? Why should I, and that is the feeling when you go through it for so long. And like when I wrote my story, I thought really hard about like how I wanted to portray it. So through the eyes of a child. But not only that, when you read my book, sometimes my thoughts are very clouded, and sometimes it's choppy in the way I write it. But I did that purposely, because that's exactly how a child feels and thinks when they're going through abuse, because nothing is ever clear. You're always waiting, like you said, for the shoe to drop. You never know what's going to happen to you next. So you're in that fight, flight mode 24/7. And everything is choppy and everything is clouded. And then things do go into slow motion type of feel, because you're always in panic and you're always in fear. So those things do such damage that people do need to realize. Like, if you see these things and you're feeling these things are happening, if you step in and save this child or help this child, you just don't know what you're really doing. You're just saving them in so many ways, not just in the moment, like you said, their future, because you're saving them from further harm, further damage. And we do need to support these kids. We need to support these children, these young adults. They need us.
Absolutely. And as I say, they need us every day. But more than ever right now, because of what we are going through and the fact that we have had to withdraw from society, I cannot even begin to comprehend how some of these kids must be feeling, knowing that they are there with their abuser.
Every day,
And it could
24/7.
just
Yes.
be one abuser, it could be abusers, depending what's in that family environment.
Right.
And just put yourself in their shoes for 1 minute as an adult when you listen to Lisa's story and what she went through. And I warned them at the beginning that there's going to be moments where you're just going to go, no, 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 no. How much worse can this
Yeah.
get? And
Yeah.
but
It is that
think
way.
you as a child, how would you have processed that? What would you have done? Who could you have turned to? And if the answer is, well, there was nobody, then why can't you be that person that can reach out and say, okay, that child will never know it was me that stepped in, but be that person. Be the
Be
person.
that person. Yes. I have to
Everything
tell you, when all this started, oh, I'm sorry, when all this started with the epidemic and we had to all stay home, the first couple of weeks in, I couldn't sleep. It triggered me on so many levels because I kept thinking of all these children
Yes.
that are being damaged daily now. Like you said, they're trapped in these homes. They're being abused. You know, I look around at my surroundings. I look at my children that I'm raising, and they're in these happy, loving homes. And I'm homeschooling them at this point because this is what we need to do. But their days are happy and they're loved and they're safe. But in the back of my mind, the triggers are just flying off the handle because all I can envision are these children who are living in, say, these dark, dirty places and being abused, like you said, maybe could be more than one abuser. So now it's day in and day out. Their mindset, the way they must feel, it's got to be so terrifying, and they must feel so abandoned. That's a huge word, because I felt abandoned by so many people back then. And I'm sure these children, who their only safe haven was probably a school or kids, you know, like boys and girls clubs, those things that they can go to. It's all taken away from them. They have to feel so alone and abandoned right now. And it's scary times, because when we talk about not only just the abuse factor, but the suicide rate, how many young children like me at that time thinking how I'm going to do this, how many young children out there right now at this moment are thinking the same exact thing, feeling there's no way out, I'm abandoned by everybody, I'm not worth living, now I'm just going to die. And that to me is such it's been triggering to me, and I've been having to really work through that for myself, because you know, as one person we can only do so much. So the best thing we can do is to push for more advocating and more, trying to get other people to step up like we have. And
it is. You have a responsibility. You have to step up. And if you're not aware of anything that's going on, and maybe your teenage son or daughter comes to you and says that they're worried that their friend that they're talking with on social media, has a bruise or seems really sad and different, and they're worried about them.
Right.
You don't just say, well, whatever. If they're going through a stage, you have the opportunity to sit down and talk with your child, your teenager, ask them why they're like that. What are their concerns? And remember, kids will only come and talk to you when they really want your guidance and support. And don't rebuke them. Don't invalidate their concern. Don't dismiss it. Take the time. You've got the time. You're home. Take the time and listen to what their concerns are, and then problem solve and step up.
Right. And that's true. Step up. And it's true. It's like, we all live such busy lifestyles, and our lives are on such fast mode all the time. And I think that many people miss the signs because we're always pushing to the next event. So, a child may say, oh my gosh, my friend said da 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 da. And the parent or caregiver might not fully grasp what the reality of what they're saying, because we're always moving so quickly.
Yes.
It's like, oh no, it's going to be fine. It'll be fine. Fine. Well, that's when we really need to take that step back and say, wait a minute, you just said what? And really process what they're saying in the moment, because it could be a very important key, and it could be the only time that child or young adult may have said it out loud. Because I also remember that as well as a young teen, reaching out to my uncle. Now, I had never spoke about anything that was happening to me, And I felt the courage one day to say to my uncle, I'm not feeling safe. There's things happening here, but I couldn't fully verbalize what was happening. And his response to me was so cold. And he said, well, what do you want me to do about it?
Yeah.
And when he did that to me, it shut me down completely. Like after that episode, after that moment, I did not speak of anything. So there was that one little glimpse of opportunity that if he had said to me, well, really, tell me what's happening. What can I do to help? That could have changed my whole life.
Yes.
That could have turned things in such a different direction for me. Because at that time, that's when I was being sexually abused. That's when my dad was already gone. You know, my mom was at her peak of the abuse factor, which she was imploding onto me daily. And I was reaching. And he was the person that I reached out to, and he totally shut me down. So with that, I went into silence mode and just endured. So with children and young adults, there's only that little window of opportunity.
Absolutely.
So that's another reason we need to push even harder to say, okay, really, what is going on? Really take notice and really be assertive and, you know, be understanding and try to help and not push things away.
No, I agree. And if you have kids at home, and you're in a great, very loving, supportive home, encourage your kids to reach out to their friends and classmates, even if it's a classmate that may be a little different or maybe is not a close friend. But now's the opportunity to, let's empower them with some great skills of compassion and understanding. But just by them reaching out, you don't know what you're doing. It could save that kid's life. It could give them an opportunity that they could ask for help.
Giving someone encouragement.
When you think about it, they are behind locked doors. And if you're on lockdown, you won't have that opportunity to go to the door to check how they're doing. So you now have to do this via remote communication.
Right.
And so, be there. Ask, your son and daughter, maybe just send a message, an email, a text, just, connect with everyone in your classroom, see how they're doing, how are things going.
Right, how's it going? Yes, that's big.
Kids are very intuitive, and they know when things are not right, and maybe the child or the teenager that keeps to themselves and doesn't seem to have friends, be the better person and reach out.
Yes. And it's funny that you're talking about that, because it's interesting, because with we're raising our grandchildren. So my granddaughter has this girl in school that was really giving her a hard time and just, constantly on her and different things. And her and I chatted about it. And I said to her, let's take this a step back for a minute. Let's look at from this girl's point of view. She's really trying to get your attention. She's really trying to be, to be a friend in a sense, even though she's doing it in such a negative way. Yeah. So let's look at the bigger picture. What do you think her home life is like? She's looking at your home life, because like some of the things like she would like say to her, oh, you live the perfect life, you've got all this, those types of things. So of course, when a young girl, she's gonna, or a young man, if that was the case, they'd be like, well, why are they saying these things to me? Or like, not, those cues that they haven't learned yet, at 12 years old, 11, 12 years old. And I said, she might have some things going on in her home life that are not really good. And she's probably seeing you, in a sense, as a role model or somebody she wishes that she could be, and she needed support. So maybe by being friends with you might help her in some way.
Absolutely.
So my granddaughter stopped, and she just didn't say anything. And she's kind of like, she's just being like a pain kind of thing, those kind of things. And it's typical, 6th grade stuff. And I said, no. I think it goes much deeper than that. I think it's because she has things happening. And the more my granddaughter thought about it, and the more she kind of found out little things here and there, she came back to me and she said, she calls me Mima. So she's like, Mima, she does have things happening. Her home life is not really, really good. And it kind of came into perspective for her as a young woman, and those are other good things that we can do as parents, grandparents, role models, mentors, just giving kids the bigger picture. So it teaches them
Absolutely.
empathy and compassion. And with that, like you said, tapping in and reaching out to kids and reaching out to peers and saying, hey, how's it going? Are you okay? You know, we're teaching them these wonderful skills
Exactly.
that they all
Exactly.
need to learn, and helping one another. Peer support is very important.
No, I agree. And actually, you've done the conclusion beautifully. Yes. Yes, we've run out of time, but that's fine. Because, well, no, because it is such an
Yes.
emotional story that people
It
need
is.
to hear, but also that now more than ever, well, we are imploring everyone just to step up
Yes.
and just be kind and be supportive and understanding, and just check on people. And if
Right.
you have that funny feeling in the pit of your stomach, or someone is saying things to you, or even if you're seeing on a Facebook post comments that are being made that make you think, okay, hold on a minute,
Something's wrong.
if you can't reach out to that person and offer support, then you need to follow up with a wellness check or with the hotline number, but you have to do something,
Yes.
because it could mean the difference between life and death.
Absolutely.
And offering that child an opportunity to have a better life, a safe life.
A safe life. You're right. And I always say, go with your gut, because 9 times out of 10,
it's right.
Your gut is going to be right. And I always say 9 times out of 10, because maybe there's always that 1% maybe that it's not. But again, that goes in with asking the questions. What's it going to hurt to ask? What's it going to hurt to say? Because if nothing is going on, then nothing is going to change. It's okay. But if
you know you've done the right thing.
Right. And your gut's saying to you something's not right, and you push for it, and then things come to play and you see that it's the reality, you're helping that child in need. And that's, again, it should be about the child and helping, and a more understanding, less judgment. We're a very judgmental world, you know, and we need more understanding, more compassion. So all these things in the end, ask those questions. That's so important.
Absolutely. I 100% agree. Lisa, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think we need to bring you back on for a part 2, because there's still so much.
Yes, I'd love to do a part 2. There's so much to talk about. I mean, you know my story. It's very long and deep, and there's many things. But yeah, I'd love to come back and chat with you again, because this is so important, and I'm so grateful to be with you tonight.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, and
thank you.
Thank you for everything that you do. It's been awesome.
Thank you. You as well.
Thank you. So we're going to take a very quick commercial break. We'll give you Lisa's biography, all the social media links, information about NAASCA, National Association of Adult Survivors of Childhood Abuse, NASCAR, which is the car racing, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Lisa Zarcone is an author, a child and mental health advocate, a public speaker, a blogger, and a radio personality. She's a wife, a mother of 3, and a grandmother of 3. Lisa gained her voice by validating her story, and she healed through the process. She was able to see the view and perspective of the people in her life, and that is where she found forgiveness. She also serves as a mentor to young women in a lockdown facility teaching journaling, poetry, and art therapy. Her book, The Unspoken Truth, a Memoir, a child's story as adults journey towards healing, talks about childhood abuse through her own eyes. She's currently the Massachusetts National Ambassador for the National Association of Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, and is spreading awareness for child safety and mental health issues. Find her memoir on Amazon and on Barnes & Noble, or check it out on her website at lisazarcone.net. You can also find her on social media on her Twitter handle at LZarcone11, on Facebook at facebook.com/LisaZarcone11, and on Instagram at Lisa Unspoken Truth.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Engage, Empower, and Educate with our awesome guest, Lisa Zarcone. Please do check out her social media links and the NASCAR website. There's some awesome information there about child abuse, adult abuse, domestic violence, lots of great resources. And also, if you have time and you'd love to read a book, I do encourage you to check out her book. I've read it. It is very raw. It is very real. Parts of it, you're just going to be almost wanting to scream. You cannot believe it. But I think it's a story that needs to be heard, and it will enable you to have a very different perspective about childhood abuse and what we can all do to try and make a difference in a child or a teenager's life. So I wish you all a safe, happy, and healthy week, and please stay safe, stay well during this pandemic, and I'll see you again same time, same place next Thursday on Engage, Educate, and Empower. Bye-bye.